common axiom is that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Another axiom is that we sweat in peace so that we don't bleed in war. Here at the Marine Corps Association, we fully understand both. That is why we offer through our professional development page on our website a comprehensive catalog of battle studies, tactical and ethical decision games, and war games to ensure that not only do we learn from the past, but we embrace the thoughts and decisions that influence the outcomes of some of the greatest actions of the Marine Corps. We have tools and techniques that will enhance both unit training as well as enable comprehensive self-study. Check out all that the Marine Corps Association has to offer on our website. Go to mca-marines.org/professional-development. That's mca-marines.org/professional-development and get your reps and sets in. Hey Scuttlebutt listeners, welcome to episode 233. This week, we welcome Editor-in-Chief of Leatherneck and Gazette magazines, Col Chris Woodbridge, to the Scuttlebutt to talk about the U.S.'s military operation in Iran. We recorded this episode on day 10 of the war, knowing that by the time you listen, things may have changed dramatically. But we didn't want to release an episode early in the conflict, given that much of the information, including the actual strategic objectives, was still not publicly known. Now that the campaign is in its second week, we figured we'd jump into the fray. Colonel Woodbridge talks to us about the history of the U.S.-Iranian relations and the U.S.'s previous involvement in Iran to give us a better idea of how we got here and what the stated objectives of the conflict are. We also touch on what may be next. Hope is not a course of action, but hopefully you take something away from this that helps shape your impressions of what's going on and at least make some sense of the ever-churning news cycle. This is episode 233. Hey Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us and your continued support. I'm Vic, and I'm here with our Editor-in-Chief of Gazette and Leatherneck magazine, Col Chris Woodbridge. Sir, thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
It is a good morning, and it is a information-filled morning. So this, folks, we're going to be doing a Iran update. We're, I think, on day 10, so we're a little behind on this, but we didn't want to just jump into the fray with as little information, knowing that with the Commandant's episode coming out last week, this was not going to be up to date if we had tried to just sort of shoehorn it into our programming. So, yeah, we are coming in a little late, but I think this actually might be worthwhile because we have a lot more information. There's a lot more that's developed on the ground, as it were. And this seems to be a reoccurring segment. Maybe we should change the name to something like War-ish or something for these, because I'm sure there's more on the horizon. But we just did Venezuela 8 weeks ago, and here we are talking Iran. So, sir, again, thank you for taking the time.
Well, and I'm thinking, the situation always changes rapidly. Often very little accuracy in any predictions. I think back to 5 years ago when Russia first invaded Ukraine, the predictions that would be,
done in the weekend,
a lightning
right?
war over in a weekend, and we are only heading into 2 weeks of Operation Epic Fury, and as of the news this morning, Iran has elected a new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei. He's the son of the previous supreme leader, and only 56 years old. That's young, very young in that culture for a leader, for a mullah or an ayatollah. And so
yeah, we're definitely going to jump
see.
into that because that's a hornet's nest in and of
But,
itself.
but obviously, the open question is, how long will he last?
Right.
And what position will he really take? His reputation is very much as a hardliner, and a hardliner when it comes to controlling the population
Right.
of Iran.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah. I fear that things for the Iranians just got a lot worse. And you will see. I mean, he'll probably end up being a mole man here for the next
Exactly.
few months. So
Well, and also I've got to paraphrase recent interview with Admiral Kirby, who was a previous spokesman for the Department of Defense. War humbles you when it comes to trying to predict things,
Right.
and you need to maintain that humility when you think you understand what's going on, and when you think you have a predictable outcome, you will almost inevitably be proven incorrect, either completely wrong or just off center, off bullseye from what you really thought you were achieving, which leads to unintended consequences that really follow a logic of their own.
Yeah, sure. I mean, both of us experienced, the demilitarization of Sunnis in Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein, which I'm sure many very smart people thought that was a great idea. And yeah, but on that note, let's just throw out the standard disclaimer that there's going to be a lot of speculation today. We are going to do our best to keep it out of the political realm. We're just going to really talk about what the strategy is, the tactics, what this means, like how it's nested within our NDS and NSS. And we really are going to try to keep politics out of it as much as we can. There will be some bleed over, I'm sure. But just understand that we are doing our best here, and we are mainly speculating because everything we'll be talking about today is on the low side. And as you can all imagine, this is a high level operation right now. And so with that being said, let's just set the table, sir. If you could give us let's get on the Wayback Machine and just how did we get here, enter 1953.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's very important, despite the way our news cycle runs and the way our media likes to, announce stories, breaking news. This conflict isn't breaking news. This didn't just happen overnight. Both the problem of Iran in the region and internationally, and the plan or plans to resolve or deal with that problem have been around for decades.
Yeah, I mean,
been around for a long time.
There's a reason why Century City, right outside of Los Angeles, has a massive Persian population.
Absolutely, and that there's the expatriate Persian Iranian population around the world is very large. It dates back to, again, the period of the 50s through the 70s and 80s, sort of waves of immigrants leaving Iran for a variety of reasons. But their opinions of what's going on vary tremendously also. Mm-hmm. Again, where you sit is where you stand. So the Shahs of Sunset are very much in favor of the regime going away. Some other Iranian students, engineers in Europe and the United States may have different views on it. Some of them expressed those views on the streets of New York City over the weekend. But going into that Wayback Machine, the key dates, and you mentioned it, are 1953. During the early 50s, there was a secular political movement in Iran, secular meaning non-Islamist, and also a socialist secular movement led by one of their ministers in their parliament named Mohammad Mossadegh, and he was elected prime minister of Iran in 1953. There was then a very deliberate plan executed by our intelligence agency, the CIA at the time, and the British intelligence, Foreign Intelligence Service, MI6, that removed him from power. And why did that happen? Again, leader of a secular populist, left-leaning socialist movement in the mid-1950s was poison for the Western world.
Well, that would have controlled the Straits of Hormuz and had a warm water port.
Control the Straits of Hormuz, an already well-established petroleum industry. And if at that time in the 1950s, if the leadership of a nation was socialist or left-leaning, they were going to get in bed with the Soviet Union. It was a binary, bipolar world. and if you weren't with us, you were against us, whether that's Moscow talking or Washington or London talking. And so that was deemed strategically necessary to ensure that we had a friendly regime to the West in that country. And the answer for that was to place Reza Pahlavi in the position of Shah. Shah's Farsi for king. And so he became Reza Shah Pahlavi. And for decades, he controlled the country and very much was an iron fist with his own people. But he was our iron fist. He was, the old saying of that time is the president of country X might be an SOB, but at least he's our SOB. And so we needed that in the region. But what that did was lead to, again, in the streets, in the mosques, in the local councils or majlises, it led to the growth of another populist movement. This populist movement was not secular. This populist movement was very much a Shiite fundamentalist Islamic movement. And that grew and fomented despite the Shah's crackdowns throughout the 1960s and 70s. And then in the mid to late 70s, the Shah got sick. The Shah had cancer, and the Shah went to Paris to get cancer treatment in 1979. That may be one of the single worst intelligence failures of our intelligence and community and State Department. In 1979, neither the State Department nor the CIA had any indication that the Shah was dying, that he was out of the country to get cancer treatment and ultimately not to survive. The reason for that, again, very much internal. 1973 to 1977, our CIA, our human intelligence and direct operations capabilities were gutted through a series of congressional actions and the actions of the appointed directors because of some illegal and extra legal activities that the agency had been doing for years. And so there was, particularly in 1977, a firing of hundreds of intelligence operatives, and that left us without that layer of sensors out in the world. Largely the same, a little bit different, but again, a reduction in capability on the State Department side. And so, come 1979, nobody caught that the leader of that nation that we had installed wasn't long for this world. We also didn't catch that a counter force was rising and was introduced back into the country. The Ayatollah Khomeini had been in exile in Europe, and he was returned to Iran and kicked off or started the Islamic Revolution. And to this day, the leaders of Iran, their legitimacy rests in were they part of that revolution. Really, the current newly appointed supreme leader is the first to not have that pedigree. At most he was a he was a glint in his dad's eyes back when the revolution actually took place. But interestingly, not unlike totalitarian communist states, the revolution can never end.
Right.
The revolution has to continue. If you've won the revolution in your country, the next requirement is to start exporting the revolution internationally.
Well, and also too the metric for membership shifts as well as people die out. So
Exactly.
like you said, like the litmus test was, were you part of it? Well, those folks are dying or
Exactly.
are dead. So now,
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, the same occurred in the Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
For decades, you had to have been on the Long March with Mao in the 1930s to be in charge of anything. age takes its toll, and now you have new generations of leadership. So perhaps there's a little of that going on, but again, his
time wins every war.
That's exactly right. The worm wins, and so he. It's yet to be seen what the trajectory will be now that there's a new supreme leader. But again, the other key events of 1979, you have an Islamic revolution, Shia-led fundamentalist revolution in Iran, and next door you have an Islamic state sitting, sharing a land border with the Soviet Union, and with the Soviet Union's Islamic states, those parts of the old Soviet Union, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, that were predominant Islamic states even under communism. And so the Soviet Union sees a threat now of an Islamic revolution potentially on their doorstep that could spread into their borders. And in 1979, we see the invasion of Afghanistan. And purely as an effort to block any problem of, in the words of the time, the mullahs taking over, we all know where that wound up. The first step was Mujahideen, trained in Pakistan, equipped by our Central Intelligence Agency and other
Charlie Wilson's war.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and those same Mujahideen would expand their recruiting base and start bringing in fighters, freedom fighters from all over the Muslim world, the Sunni Muslim world, to include Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and that's where we get Al-Qaeda. And then from Al-Qaeda we get ISIS. So again, these connecting files have been around for decades and go way back. The other immediate problem that presented itself, 1979, Islamic Revolution, U.S. Embassy taken and hostages taken by the regime. And for over 400 days, those hostages would be held and used as a strategic bargaining chip, an international bargaining chip.
Yeah. And a quick reference for that for our listeners, watch the movie Argo.
Yes.
I thought that they did a fantastic job of being sort of sticking to the facts and just showing how that whole hostage rescue went down. And I forget the agent's name, but I mean, it wasn't until very recently that he was actually recognized.
Yeah, it took a solid 20 plus years before all of that was declassified. Same for the story behind Charlie Wilson's war. Good movies, better books, as always.
Sure.
But worth the time to see or to read those books and see what that level of direct operational national intelligence service is really like. It's not Daniel Craig and James Bond. It's
parkouring over rooftops.
Yeah, no. It's a lot more like general contractors and guys running trucking companies. So, but the hostage crisis also had long-lasting effects, particularly here in the U.S. and in the Marine Corps, directly in the Marine Corps.
Well, I mean, it undid the Carter administration.
Absolutely,
I mean, he was the golden boy until that went. It exposed
flaws in the Carter administration's and Cyrus Vance's foreign policy, but it also resulted in some exposure of weakness and lessons within the Military Services Department of Defense. The failed hostage rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw, clearly exposed the inability of services to collaborate and coordinate with each other within the U.S. military, even within the very small special operations community. And so the result of that ultimately would be the Goldwater-Nichols Act and the creation of the Joint Force and Joint Regional Combatant Command Headquarters and U.S. Special Operations Command. Lessons learned from a strategic failure and a tactical failure, but the benefit of those lessons we see today within the Marine Corps, the training and selection of our Marine security guards. Again, those Marines, not directly, certainly not directly responsible for what happened at the embassy, but improving their capabilities. We just saw that play out here 2 weeks ago on the streets of Karachi, Pakistan. Again, a group of rioters supporting Iran try to storm the embassy. I think 20 killed. Good sight picture, sight alignment for those Marines on post 1. And that's exactly what they're there to do. It's so much more than a ceremonial post. So very, very positive in its ultimate results. Again, particularly, we would not have CENTCOM, we would not have U.S. SOCOM, we would not have the joint force that we have today without the lessons of that failed hostage rescue mission. So that's the 1970s, and so then what happens? Some people would say there were decades and decades of admiring the problem or looking for other solutions. The reality is, on the military side, the military arm of national power and influence. So yes, diplomatic efforts made. Yes, economic efforts made to try to essentially buy our way out of the problem. Well, the sanctions regime, that's a diplomatic, economic effort.
But from the state, like you said, that's the State Department's focus. But there are indications from the military side that Iran was now starting to exercise proof of concept operations. We had the Iran-Iraq War, Beirut in the early 80s, where, it was just a cornucopia of various Shia, Druze, Sunni, Western allied forces. And so I think we start to see the seedbeds of sort of the proxy fight there. We see that conventional warfare doesn't work in the Iran-Iraq war for the Iranians because, I guess in a way it's a stalemate, but Iraq definitely comes out of that one.
And remember who we were supporting at the time.
And then and like you said, so our whole thing of instituting the Shah as a deterrent to Soviet influence totally eats us in the ass, because who supports Iran during the Iran-Iraq war is the Soviets.
That's right. And so we wind up, in a way, the Iran-Iraq war, to a degree, a proxy war between Soviet-backed and armed Iranian forces, and then NATO, or U.S. and British educated, trained, to a degree armed Iraqi forces. So there was some indirect support of Saddam Hussein in that war, which was a significant war on a bunch of different levels. It was, the tactics of World War I and World War II. It was nuclear biochemical, at least chemical attacks, chemical and biological attacks inside Iraq as an effort to control the internal populace. So the Kurds of Halabja were gassed by Saddam after the Iran-Iraq war because of perceptions that they supported the Iranians. There are Kurds in both countries. So that was, again, not an insignificant conflict, but kind of overshadowed by what happened before it and after it. But the other side to this is, in that period of diplomatic pressure, of sanctions regimes, of Iran testing or developing their irregular or proxy capabilities. Number one, who's the focus of this? And then number two, who becomes the focus, and what do they do about it? Initially, the focus is strictly on Israel. All right, Israel, the little Satan, close to home, surrounded by enemies, and in many of those states, particularly in Lebanon and Syria, you do, and Iraq in particular, you have Shia populations that are able to be manipulated, able to be supported, able to be radicalized by Iran. And so you see that start to play out, but again, the focus primarily on Israel. And Israel, with an existential threat surrounding them, continue to develop their ability to fight those proxies locally and defend themselves, but continue looking at the source.
Right.
To continue looking at what the problem growing in Iran really looks like. And one of the things that leads to is, again, the one thing that we really didn't have or don't have, at least not in that theater, and that is on-the-ground human capability. And so very risky, very dangerous operations by the Israeli intelligence service on the ground in Iran to collect that
it's like
actionable intelligence.
And from the American perspective, it's that old axiom of 3 white guys in a van is still 3 white guys in a van.
No,
right?
absolutely.
Like, it's really hard for us, especially not tapping into the diaspora that we had
That's
here.
right.
To
we don't
embed.
blend.
Right.
We don't blend as a rule. And so finding the right operatives is a capability that our allies in the region, that Israel, were able to provide. And so that collecting on the ground continues for decades. And what begins to emerge, both through their efforts and stated position of the Iranian regimes, is seeking to develop nuclear capabilities. Nuclear capabilities writ large. We want to develop nuclear power. We want to run our country cleanly off of nuclear power plants. Yes, and of course, those are dual-use technologies, and the enrichment of uranium can be used to run nuclear-efficient plants, and it can also be used to develop nuclear weapons. And so we and our Israeli allies began tracking that capability and really what we would call in the military working out a decision support template. When we know this for sure, if that happens, then the adversary has a set amount of time to rapidly develop a functional capability. And the focus of that collection effort for intelligence is on when do they have, first of all, when have they developed a program such that once they have the required means, how long to create an actual workable weapon. And it started to center around roughly, again, because of the work that was going on in the Iran nuclear program, they developed those resources and capabilities such that once they had a sufficient amount of highly enriched uranium, it would take approximately 2 to 4 weeks to actually have one functional device. And then from there, it becomes faster to develop additional functional devices. And we're talking about fission bombs, atomic bombs, similar to what we used in Japan at the end of World War II. Entire new effort, longer timeline to develop a fusion bomb, hydrogen bomb technology, much more devastating.
And I guess the point to that is that for civilian energy use has a very specific kind of signature and a very specific process.
Exactly.
And then to weaponize and have that weapon be deliverable is also very specific, has a very distinct look to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, not to try to even get into nuclear science. You're absolutely right. The machinery, the tools, if you will, many of which are dual use. Again, we're just using this to make X-ray material, or we're just using this to refine uranium for nuclear power plants. Is hard to, but the tool itself can be used for multiple purposes. On the military side, again, those decades were not spent sitting on our hands, and there were years and multiple iterations at multiple levels of war games, experiments, and training exercises focusing on Iran as as the adversary. Some of them were even unclassified. Country of red, country of blue. Yes, the map is the Straits of Hormuz and Keshem Island and in Iran, but the scenario and the OPFOR itself were based on our assessments of Iranian capabilities. And I say multiple levels. In the mid-'90s, as a student captain at then our school in the Marine Corps here at Quantico, at the time called Amphibious Warfare School, now Expeditionary Warfare School, our final exercise was that country red, country blue Iran scenario in the Straits of Hormuz. And it was, I think it was either called Eastern Cross or Eastern Crescent, and that was the exercise you did every year, kind of a 3-day planning exercise and then war game execution in simulation to get the graduation exercise for the class. That year I was the OPFOR commander. And actually Colonel Mundy, who's our colleague here at the MCA, captain at the time, he was one of the Blue Force commanders. It was a MEB landing on Keshem Island, was the scenario, and the one thing I could claim as a victory is I fouled the deck of one of the LHAs, one of the large amphibs, with an Iranian small aircraft. Suicide mission, crashed into the superstructure of, I believe it was LHA-5, the Peleliu, and fouled the deck for a period of only about 12 hours before damage control had that platform up and running again. But it was a small effort at an asymmetric attack, and I caught hell for it. Because, no, that's not what the Iranians would do. And I said, what, a suicide attack? Think about it. So fast forward, again, after a number of excursions on these types of exercises at our Command and Staff College, Army Command and General Staff College, Air Force planning. We start operating in Iraq. We start operating in Afghanistan after 9/11, so 2002-ish. Running in the background at that time, and you'll recall during the first George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld administration, the push in DOD, the Department of Defense, and across the Joint Force was transformation. And we had established a Joint Forces Command down in Norfolk, Virginia, as part of within NATO Allied Command transformation. And the push was using new technologies, give it a name, call it net-centric warfare, network-centric warfare, and let's do an experiment, a war game, to try out these new capabilities, some emergent, some aspirational, to fight a realistic scenario. And the scenario chosen was a Straits of Hormuz, Iran scenario with a U.S. Incursion or expedition landing into the country. So actual amphibious boots on the ground, in addition to the extended air campaign. That became an exercise after some years of preparation, known as Millennium Challenge 2002. Very famous today. Article just recently came out by Alexander Bullock in the Daily Wire, the title being "America Lost an Infamous War Game to Iran. That's Why We're Winning Now." And one of the highlights there was the OPFOR commander was a retired Marine, Lieutenant General, known to all, great American, Lieutenant General Paul K. Van Riper, ran the OPFOR. And he took, again, an asymmetric approach as the enemy. Two main actions that truly defeated that effort by the Blue Force, the exercise force, to execute their plan. Preemptive missile strikes. So don't wait for the Americans to do something first. Strike preemptively, and then use again, asymmetric, small craft, small aircraft to get in between and under the American, particularly the Aegis cruiser radar umbrella. So, you look at what happened in that, and the lessons of that. And there's a lot of kind of lurid media about how, and true, they reset the war game and kind of scripted the enemy approach after that in order to achieve the exercise objectives. But the lessons do show themselves in what's going on today, particularly when it comes to the role of the United States Air Force and the development of capabilities by that service.
Well, and the emphasis on taking out the Navy as well, because, one of the main things, especially when I was in Dubai, was their small craft fleet and their use of basically using them as like sappers.
Exactly.
I mean, they were the original swarm before the drone
That's right.
stuff.
And really that swarm can be traced back, that small boat swarm can be traced back to Millennium Challenge.
Yeah.
And so our counters for it, our ability to prevent that threat is what you see today. Mm-hmm. But, the Air Force over this time developed both this is from organize, train, and equip. The United States has several combined air operation centers around the world. Probably the biggest and most capable, because of over 20 years of continuous operations, is the one in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base. Oh, by the way, the largest U.S. air base in the world. And so the capability of the U.S. Air Force and the combined air forces to prosecute a deliberate air campaign that first takes away the enemy's integrated air defense system, then takes away the rest of his air defense systems, then starts attacking long-range targets with unmanned systems, again, risking very few air crews in order to remove the most significant counterfire threats, and then continuing that. And now it's going into its second week. For reference, remember that it was 30 days of an virtually identical air campaign to set the conditions in Iraq for Operation Desert Storm. 30 days. We're 2 weeks in. We have better capabilities now. We have more long-range precision munitions, and we have used those to degrade that integrated air defense system to the point where now we are using gravity bombs. We have local air superiority, which allows us to use those types of weapons and to fly large lumbering platforms like the venerable B-52, which has never lost its relevance, to prosecute, again, those targets. And that will continue to happen. When you look at the stated goals, the objectives of this operation, and the means to do that. So the ends, we want to destroy their offensive missile capability, destroy their missile production capabilities, destroy their Navy, and destroy other security or defense infrastructure that prevents us from doing whatever we want in their skies and potentially on their ground. And we want them, and this is somewhat problematic, to, quote, never have nuclear weapons. That last objective requires that it has both an intangible and a tangible element. The tangible element is, yes, destroying the means, the production, the tools, the particle accelerators, the cyclotrons, the magnets, all those things.
The flux capacitors.
Yes. And obviously also the people with the knowledge to do that, and the raw materials, the uranium. But it also has an intangible component to it. You have to remove the will of the leadership and the people to pursue nuclear weapons. The reality is, within the Islamic world, nuclear weapons already exist. If Saudi Arabia, for example, wanted a nuclear weapon, they would buy one from Pakistan tomorrow. It's that simple. And so the desire for that could be achieved in other ways. And so that requires other approaches from our side rather than a purely kinetic attrition approach. Because make no mistake, that is what this campaign is right now.
Right.
It is a campaign of attrition to remove
from the air.
Yes, to remove primarily physical capabilities. The administration, our administration, has said that this is not a regime change operation, that we're not going to get into a boots on the ground, endless war quagmire. That's entirely right and correct. Sure, we don't have to do that. But I think ultimately, to achieve particularly that last objective, there has to be some change of mind.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that rhetoric coming out with the call to action for the Iranian people to rise up and take advantage of this opportunity for other discussions of the types of leaders that we would like to see emerge from this. So there is, I agree with you 100%. There is that specter of this, because I think there's this understanding of the will. And I do want to juxtapose, we mentioned earlier about, it was just 8 weeks ago that we had an operation to remove Nicolas Maduro. And so I think that that concept of the will is very important. And I'm not suggesting that we didn't see this or we don't understand the complexity here, but just from the low side stuff that we've been gathering, and as we are trying to make heads and tails of what's going on, is that the thing about the Iranian people, that the operation in Venezuela may have given us a false positive, is that Venezuela, their authoritarianism is still very much at its infantile state. And so those people's main will, as especially as we talk maneuver warfare and getting into that OODA loop and understanding the will of the people, the will of Venezuela, from me in the cheap seats, is just staying in power. That's the biggest thing. And the reason we wanted to dive into the Iranian history of this conflict is because we both wanted to show that this will is institutionalized. We're talking about half a century of authoritarianism. So the lust for power is well and gone. That honeymoon phase is over. I don't know if you can just bomb the will out of a country that has had over 50 to 70 years of institutionalized authoritarianism.
And it's authoritarianism based on religious true believers. And that's something that, again, very different from really anywhere in the West. It was something I learned in my first tour in Iraq, in Najaf, with the Shia population there. When you look at a mullah or an imam, and you see him with his black turban or his white turban and his robes and his beard, our minds automatically, heuristically jump that I'm looking at a clergyman.
Right.
I'm looking at a cleric, a religious man. And that's correct. But in their society, in the Shia world, you're also looking at a lawyer, a politician, and a businessman.
Yeah, and a community service.
All wrapped in one. And they see no differences between those activities because it all has to be based on a foundation of Islamic law. And no one is entitled to or qualified to interpret Islamic law in their world but an imam, a mullah. And so the legitimacy of those orders, those laws, it goes back ultimately to the Hadith and the Quran. It is based on their interpretation of Islam. The danger there, and people have used rhetorically words of death cult and murder cult and things like that. What Shia Islam is a political movement within the religion. It's based on who should be interpreting those laws and who should be in charge. Dating back to the death of Muhammad himself. But where that also comes to roost is throughout the history of Islam, of Shia Islam. Those leaders have met bad ends, either through internal assassinations and poisonings, or more frequently through war with Sunni Muslims and other enemies. And so within all the sects of Shia Islam, and they're not unit, there's at least 5 different sects of Shia Islam, the largest of which, referred to in the West as the Twelvers, are in charge of Iran. They believe there were 12 imams after the death of Muhammad. The 12th imam never died. He went into what's called occultation, a mysterious, spiritual, other reality, to return at the end times. And depending on your interpretation of that, and I'll use a wild word here, eschatology,
Nice.
within religion, end times science, are in Christianity, our Book of Revelation, the return of the Messiah in Judaism. They have sort of 2 camps. One that says the end times have to happen for the Mahdi to return. The other that says first the Mahdi will return and usher in the end times. What they're seeing on the ground, the average observant, true believer Iranian, is seeing the end times starting, and so now they're looking for a Mahdi. They're looking for the return of that 12th Imam that will cleanse the world in fire. That type of eschatology, that type of religious philosophy in possession of nuclear weapons is obviously a threat to the region, to the world. When we start to see or hear that sort of rhetoric coming out of Iranian media, that may be a trigger for other action, potentially ground incursions, potentially proxy forces like the Kurds or the Baluchis or the Lurs, the ethnic minorities of Iran, supported by us, to rise up and potentially change the government that way. But the other piece, to your point about the way this has been institutionalized in Iranian society, you have to look to the Basij. And they are not a purely military force. I liken them to the worst homeowners association you've ever had. Those are your neighbors in Iran, and they are both true believers.
And these are the folks that we basically dubbed the morality police.
Yes, one of their functions is the morality police, but they are also an organized militia, and they are trained and certainly educated as an insurgency, a guerrilla force, to organize that sort of resistance if there is some change of regime, even internally. And so that's going to have to be contended with, and whether we want it to be a forever war or not, those sorts of foundational thinking within the Iranian population. This is all about the next world and cleaning the planet in the end times and the return of the Mahdi. I control my neighbors, both in terms of how their daughters dress on their way to school, and when I need them all to come and build Molotov cocktails because we don't like who's in charge in Tehran. All of that needs to be factored in because it's not going to go away on its own.
Sure. And that was one of the things that I found so fascinating in the way it was antithetical to the way we think of the West, was that how much emphasis, and this, just trying to keep this on the low side, but how much emphasis within their own national defense strategies was focused internal, not just regime protection, but sort of regime reinstitution if it were to ever fall. And so I guess all of that is there are layers upon layers upon layers. So this idea that the shock and awe of the bombing, which has been wildly effective as far as destroying material, isn't going to have the same effect on the population, or at least on the institutions, that it would in, say, a Venezuela.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. The other side to it is we, again, have developed, when we talk about the military plan, the refinement of target folders and currency of what we're hitting and the precision to do it is a double-edged sword. Yes, we precisely destroyed that facility. But we didn't do a firebombing of Dresden or Tokyo.
Right.
And that's good. I mean,
we're not encouraging.
No,
that.
I'm not advocating that at all.
Right.
But it does have to be recognized when it comes to those intangibles about changing the thinking, changing the will of an adversary. And the long-term humanitarian effects on that population. That is going to largely determine the outcome. The ability of any group to meet the needs, physical and political, of that population is what's going to determine who wins long-term.
Right.
Ultimately.
And we could just go so many ways with this, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think as we have ambiguity on where the things we're seeing on the TVs, where we question its nesting within our larger documents on what it is the military is supposed to do and how the State Department was nested within our overall strategies. I think one template that is potentially useful, and obviously I'm projecting, being of the Vietnamese diaspora, but I think it's extremely interesting that we went into Vietnam not really understanding the population, not understanding the will of a people that had fought against colonial oppression since pre-World War II. To get the French out, then to get the Japanese out, then to get the French out again, and then to get the Americans out again. Our misinterpretation of what their foundational doctrines were and how this monolithic idea of communism was not solely applicable. And so we end up pushing them that way. And even after losing over 1 million people in that conflict, turned around and then tried to take other countries in that region.
Yes.
And so I only say that in that, and then they repelled the Chinese right after we left, and then they turned on the Laotians and the Cambodians. And so the reason I mention it is because if we aren't as successful as the TVs show us we are in changing that will, what comes out of it? We saw Arab Spring went pear-shaped really fast, and it looked like it was going to be awesome. Are we walking that path yet again? I don't know. It's wildly speculative, obviously.
It's a great point. We have there's discovery learning that happens every time we get involved in other conflicts. I would say that's including the big wins. World War II, discovery learning in the aftermath that we need a Marshall Plan.
Yeah.
We, the United States, need to do that.
Soft power.
That selfless, altruistic investment into Europe and into Japan. In order that was discovery learning. That was not part of the planning in 1942 or 43. Right. The early math was just how many divisions do we need to put into Europe, and how do we recruit them? So that's that. There's going to be discovery learning here as well. Whatever our desired outcomes are, those are largely achievable. A continued air campaign, missile campaign that we're prosecuting right now can definitely achieve those stated outcomes with perhaps the absence of never having a nuclear weapon and creating an Iran that is not a threat to its neighbors. Those are about will, and that is also about population will, population control, which is why I say that as this continues, and the pressure and human suffering of the population grows,
Yeah.
whoever can solve that problem will ultimately be in charge of the country. And at this point, hope is not a course of action, but I think to a degree we're hoping that is a regime that is less of a threat to its neighbors, more open to cooperation throughout the region. And that's not to be downplayed. The level of cooperation in the Gulf region right now is unprecedented.
Yeah.
The idea that Saudi Arabia and Israel
Right.
are, number one, just not trying to kill each other, but also cooperating militarily is unheard of.
Right. Jordan is a major player right now.
Jordan,
Obviously, UAE.
Azerbaijan,
Yeah.
UAE, obviously, Bahrain, Qatar. So, yeah, there's a huge positive side to this in terms of international affairs, and it's largely economically driven. And that's not bad. That's a good thing.
Well, and then one of the things, and again, I know we're getting towards the end of our discussion here, but one of the things that we didn't touch on as much was that Sunni Shia divide, and that it wasn't just this sort of simplistic Iran versus Israel thing. There's a massive, maybe read Arab Mind, and that'll sort of get you kind of a gateway into it, but it is insane the amount of complexity in this region, and it can't go without mentioning, though, like you to piggyback off what you said, that with the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Jordanians, Iraqis, with everybody kind of holding hands with the Israelis against what is fundamentally, we talked about the Shia-Sunni thing, is what they see as an existential threat to their religion as well, not just their hatred of the Jews, but within Islam itself.
Exactly.
This is a huge deal.
Well, and if there were no other players, the counter worldviews of Shia Islam versus Sunni Islam would result in a war in the Gulf region. It on the Shia side, it has to. Again, when they talk about what precipitates the end times, it's that war.
Yeah.
It's not something else. It's control of the ummah, or the body of believers of Islam. And again, it's not a doctrinal division. Both sects believe in the 5 pillars and practice it. It's a political issue about who's in charge and who has the legitimacy based on really heredity and bloodline.
And that disdain for one another is palpable. I mean, even when we were training with the Emiratis to get them ready for their deployment into Yemen, it was never about the Yemeni. It was never about the Houthi. It was always about Iran.
Exactly.
All they ever talked about.
Exactly. Every bilateral exercise or training I've ever done in the region, in Bahrain, Emirates, Oman, at the time, why are you so worried about Saddam and Iraq?
Right.
The problem is over there.
Yeah.
And then get into Iraq and discover that their own people, no, our friends are over there. I remember in 2003 in Najaf, you couldn't cross the street without seeing Iranian license plates. Everyone coming to have their relatives' remains interred in the cemetery of Najaf. Those are Iranians.
Yep.
Was Iranian intelligence service coming in too? Absolutely.
100%.
Did they support Muqtada Sadr and his Mahdi army? Why would he call it the Mahdi's army?
Right.
If we're not taking that view that first the Mahdi emerges and then the end times come and then paradise. So that divide and that tension is there, and yet we still see cooperation in the world of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
when AMZ was killed in Iraq, where did his deputy go? Iran, and gain shelter there. Same with some of the leaders of Afghanistan. Move, and they weren't Shia.
Well, yeah, 100% that we saw the effects of the Ayatollah and of the Iranian Republican Guards, their deployment into
Absolutely.
those regions where we were, for sure.
The the last lesson there, perhaps from Iraq and Afghanistan, that we, I think, have learned, is the lesson about trusting jailhouse informants. So the diaspora of Iranians, potential leaders emerge. We have the Shah's son, certainly taken up the airwaves. Also, Reza Pahlavi. I can't remember which number he is, but there's a group who he should become the leader of a new Iran. He's lived in the West almost his whole life, and exactly what we saw in Afghanistan with Hamid Karzai, and very abortively in Iraq. You can't take someone who's lived in some cases in the lap of luxury in California or in London or anywhere, and bring them in and expect them to have any credibility or support from the people who suffered under that authoritarian regime. It's where were you? Where were you?
We know where you were because you had a reality TV show.
Exactly. We were in the streets getting gunned down in the thousands in 2009. Again, a few months ago. We were doing what you wanted us to do and rebel against the regime. We had no help in 2009, but now you're doing this, and you're expecting to just waltz in on your private jet, and it worked for a little while in Afghanistan because of the U.S. presence on the ground, and because of the amount of money we were providing to the regime. All of which I think is probably in
But
Abu
it only
Dhabi
worked in that sort of area around Kabul.
That's it.
Like if you go down,
Kabul.
Yeah, if you went down to the Sherv or we were, they could give two shits about Karzai.
Exactly, and worse if you got out into the Karangal or into Helmand Province or even up north. It's a road that we've been down before recently, and I think we've probably learned that lesson about our ability to actually install a legitimate leader from the expatriate population of any country.
Inshallah. Well, I will say this, though, and not to muddy the waters as we're closing out, but there's also, we had talked about the Kurds. We were talking before we started recording. There's the issue of Turkey, that if we start to court the Kurds a little too much, what are they going to demand? What are they going to look for in reciprocity of their support? And what does that do to a NATO ally?
Yep,
that's a key player in the region also.
And then for the Turks, certainly for Erdogan's administration, it's a red line.
Sure, 100%.
Because of their internal insurgency population with their Kurdish people. Yeah. But remember, largest ethno-linguistic group without their own country.
And a key ally that's fought in every fight that we've had ever since the 90s.
With a strong enclave in northern Iraq that we've used, they've used
successfully,
very
highly
successfully, and so large Kurdish population in northwestern Iran, but Iran can't become the Greater Kurdistan. Mm-hmm. You could have a Greater Kurdistan, but there are populations, the Persian population of Iran, that wouldn't even make them a minority in that country. Mm-hmm. They'd still be the majority. This has potential, again, whether we want it to or not, to turn into that long-term, conflict. We love the quagmire term. I like to think of it as that it's like the tar baby. You know, you touched it once, and now you're never going to get it off you. So
every time you punch it, you just get stuck further in.
So I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen again with an exit strategy based on those currently stated objectives, all achievable through a kinetic, precise fires campaign. Again, perhaps coupled with a diplomatic effort that addresses the will issue. Again, meeting the needs of the population, where all will comes from. This is achievable, I think, but it's going to take some time. It's not going to take months or years, but I think we're looking at a 30 to 90 day campaign. That again is achievable, is winnable
if we make sure we don't get into mission creep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's historic in that we've been looking at a problem now and studying it and preparing and for decades, and we finally did something in the campaign planning concept of systemic operational design. We have injected energy into a complex adaptive system. Now we have to observe what the results of that are and adjust accordingly. And some of that adjustment may be moving on to the next thing. Cuba,
that's
North Korea. Again, a whole sets of other problems, but we'll just have to see, all of us. And again, thoroughly achievable, I think, based on the stated objectives right now.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. And then as far as that goes, I mean, we're recording on a Monday. This will go out on a Thursday, so you guys will be listening to it Thursday morning. It may be completely different.
What did those buffoons think?
These guys, why did they even release this?
Yep, why did they even release it? So we'll see.
I appreciate your time, sir, and this is really informative and as fun as talking about something like this.
Exactly. Thanks.
All right, thanks, folks. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.